this week, Marvel Comics actually released a comic called Spider-Man 94, which takes the place of what would have been Spider-Man the Animated Series Season 6. Spider-Man the Animated Series was actually left on a major cliffhanger, which made fans want more of the show. Season 6 was actually originally planned to happen, but due to rights deals and a bunch of other stuff that, technical background stuff, it never actually ended up happening. However, Season 5 actually ended with Madam Web and Peter teaming up to go and try to find Mary Jane Watson, who had actually gone missing earlier in the show. If you guys aren't essentially aware of what happens, is during a fight with the Green Goblin during the show, Mary Jane actually gets thrown into a portal in which she starts to travel across the multiverse. Now, Mary Jane does end up actually returning, but unknown to Peter, this is actually a clone. And then obviously a few episodes later, this version of Mary Jane, after actually marrying Peter Parker, ends up dying. After a bunch of other stuff that happens on Battle World, Secret Wars, Spider-Verse, a bunch of other crazy stuff, Peter ends up teaming up with Madam Web to try and find the real Mary Jane Watson if she is still alive. Now, during the events of X-Men 97, we actually saw Peter Parker with Mary Jane Watson, as they both have a cameo in that show. So yes, Mary Jane Watson, the real Mary Jane Watson, that is actually alive. So then this comic, Spider-Man 94, looks to explore the events after Season 5, how Peter found Mary Jane Watson, and the story beyond that. So essentially, this comic is acting as a Season 6. Now, this is a good thing and also a bad thing at the same time. The good thing is that we're actually going to find out what happens, and we actually get more of that universe, and we get more of this story. The bad news coming from this probably means we'll never actually end up getting a Season 6 or a Spider-Man 94 show, similar to how we got X-Men 97. But that brings us on to the main question. What is this story actually about? Well, we actually pick up in the heart of the story. Peter has already found MJ, and it is revealed that they're already having relationship issues. Yeah, I know, it's just, it's normal at this point, right? I mean, what is a Spider-Man story without Peter and MJ fighting from time to time? Fans might be thinking, well, does that kind of take away the point of the whole comic? The comic should have been about Peter trying to find Mary Jane. But I do understand this decision to start the story after he's found MJ, because I don't think anyone was expecting him to not find her. I think the resolution of the story was always going to be that Peter ends up back with Mary Jane at some point or another, so I do understand this decision. But the curiosity comes, how did he find her, and what are the consequences of that? And we will actually learn about that a little bit in this issue. But like I said, the issue kicks off with them having sort of a little bit of a bout. Peter's main inner conflict is introduced to us right away. The reason MJ and Peter are fighting is because this version of Mary Jane Watson never actually married Peter Parker, and she wants to marry him. However, Peter is slightly unsure. He's got this doubt in his mind that the same thing will happen to this Mary Jane Watson that happened to the other one, that he will eventually lose her again like he did before. Peter has lost MJ twice now, and he doesn't want that to happen a third time. So his doubts are actually very understandable, but of course this upsets MJ. From this point on, this first issue makes a really big point out of recapping important moments from the show, and making sure that people realize that it's actually tied to the show. Which at some points does get slightly annoying if you have actually watched the show fairly recently, because it's like, yeah, we know this happened, just get on with the story at hand. But I do understand why they've done it, because it's been a long time since this show aired, and maybe some fans aren't familiar with the events of the actual cartoon itself. So like I said, it does get quite annoying for fans like myself who have seen the show countless times, but the comic does a really good job of making sure that if new readers are coming on board that haven't seen the show or have only seen bits of the show before, that they can actually follow along and follow the story, because it does end up recapping a bunch of the important events that are relevant to this comic. This first issue also makes a really big point out of focusing on MJ and Peter, which I actually really like, because they are at the heart of the story. MJ ends up coming back to Aunt May's house, who we also get reintroduced to, and I'm not gonna lie, her dialogue is probably the best out of any of the characters in this comic. Although I do read every character's voice in their voices from the 90s show when reading this comic, I feel like Aunt May's was the best. I heard her character more over than any of the others. does. It's just the way the dialogue was written. It was so accurate to how she was written in the actual show. Either way, MJ and Peter end up making up, and Peter starts to realize that he's got to sort of leave the past in the past, even though those fears are definitely still present. MJ asks him to marry her again, and he says yes, so all is well and good. Right? Well, not really, because Aunt Anna comes over. You guys remember from the show, Anna Watson isn't really fond of Peter Parker, and this is a main conflict in the civilian side of Peter's life, where him, MJ, and Anna are sort of at each other's wits' end all the time. And when it started to look like things were going quite well, of course, everything just blows up in their faces, and Peter is attacked by this mystery character with a cloak and long hair. This mystery character holds Peter to the wall and tells him that he is the strongest totem of them all, and his master wants to feed on him. As the fight is taken outside, Peter uses this time to suit up into his Spider-Man costume, to which the mystery character, who goes by the name of Kane, he says he needs to take Peter to his master. And when Peter is like, well, who do you work for then? He says his name is Morlun. Of course, we all know who Morlun is, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't see this coming, but when looking back at the events of Season 5 and everything they did with the multiverse and the Spider-Verse, this kind of does make sense. Either way, we'll get more onto that in a moment. The story continues with Peter and Kane battling it out in Queens. During the fight, Peter speaks about his fears of losing Mary Jane out loud, to which Kane starts to break down, being affected by Peter's emotional outburst. Now, a quick side note here, and this is something that kind of bugged me, you guys can tell me if you kind of felt the same, is that I don't think that Peter would so openly talk about Mary Jane and sort of his personal life in front of a villain, especially a villain that he definitely doesn't know. Like, for example, Peter will talk openly about his personal life to a villain like Norman Osborn, because Norman Osborn knows Peter Parker. He obviously knows he has a relationship with his son Harry. Norman sort of knows Peter's life through and through, so Peter knows that Norman knows that information, but I don't know, it kind of felt a bit weird that Peter was sort of spouting how he doesn't want to lose Mary Jane in front of a villain that, even though he knows his identity, he doesn't really know that well. I don't know, it kind of felt a bit out of character, but obviously it was done because that was the only way to show Kane's weakness. Kane leaves because he was distressed, and that's when we cut to Morlun, who starts to drain Kane's soul because he failed him. It is then also revealed at the end of the issue that Kane is actually one of many clones who Morlun has lined up. Clones of who, we don't actually know at this point in time. With everything happening in the show previously, it is fair to assume that maybe these are clones of Peter Parker, but since they aren't the original Peter Parker, the totems of these clones aren't as strong. Either way, whatever happens, this is going to be a big mystery going forward in this comic. And that was pretty much the end of the first issue. So what are they doing here? What is going to be the story of Spider-Man 94? It's obvious that they're doing the Morlun stuff, but I really do think that this is going to tie to the end of Season 5. And I think the Spider-Verse stuff that they did at the end of Season 5 with Spider-Carnage and all that kind of stuff is eventually going to loop back around into this comic, because I think that's going to be sort of how Morlun comes to be. I reckon Morlun will be triggered by stuff that happened during the events of the Spider-Verse arc at the end of Season 5, and that's how he's going to discover, of course, Peter Parker in this universe and how he's the strongest totem, and that's how Morlun learns that he needs to feed on him. How does Morlun come to be? How does Morlun actually find Peter? Well, that might have something to do with where Peter and Madam Web went when they were trying to find Mary Jane Watson. To which a small little comic note made by one of the writers said that they're actually going to be delving into this in one of the future issues. So it looks like that is going to be the story. Where does it go from there and after then? I don't really know, but I'm interested to see what they do. Is this the best comic ever made? Absolutely not. It is sort of just average, but I do think the story does have potential, and I think if they play their cards right, this could be a fulfilling sequel to the Spider-Man animated show, and could be a good placeholder for Season 6. If you've read the comic, let me know what you think down below. If you haven't, then I'm going to be posting videos every time an issue is released, so you can just follow my videos along and sort of follow the story there. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care, and peace.